All right, here we are at another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Bill. Morning, everybody.
Here we go. Episode number 432, and its title is Creative Real Estate versus You.
Oh, I didn't know we had that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think we probably do.
All right, here is the description. Ever watch yourself staring at a potential deal, frozen like a deer in the headlights, while that little voice whispers, there's gotta be another way? Here's the stone cold truth. Most rookies are leaving piles of cash and or profit on the table because they tend to get stuck and don't know why. Have you ever noticed how most successful real estate investors seem to operate on a completely different mental frequency? Well, you are in luck, because in this single episode, we are going to reverse engineer the critical thinking these folks use when doing deals successfully. Here's a brain teaser. What if everything you know about analyzing deals is actually programmed into you? And you miss deals and all the profits attached. Be aware, though, this could act like an intervention for your real estate mindset. And you may have to rewire your mental operating system when it comes to thinking about deals and install new mindset software that will turn you around quickly for making more deals today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Today's going to be a little profound, but that's okay because I'll get you through it. So let's do our housekeeping type activity. So up until now, 432 podcasts. We record these podcasts on Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we live stream on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn. All you have to do is go there and look for Flipping Houses for Rookies. On YouTube, we do it on two channels. We do it on Flipping Houses for Rookies, and we do it on Creative REI Reply, which is the software we use that gets you deals. It gets you leads and deals. And I think right now, Peter, we got Creative REI Reply down to like 66 cents a lead. And then we let you use our software for free to do those leads.
Wow.
It's a pretty good deal. Yeah. Anyways, we're at 232. I have announced the last couple podcasts. I think somewhere around 450. I haven't completely figured it out. I've been too busy doing other things like fixing toilets and furnaces and shit like that. Mm-hmm. And a few other things I don't really want to be doing. But I think at podcast number 450, we're probably going to stop going public and we're going to go into a private podcast situation. We still will have the free podcast. It's just that you're going to have to find us in, I think we're going to use the Hiro.fm app. It's HIRO.fm. Mm-hmm. We're going to use that app. I'm not 1,000% sure on that, but so far that's been the best platform for us to use. And we will also have other podcasts that you can do that will dive deeper and go get into more details on how you can do things. Okay? So make sure you subscribe to us wherever you're watching us or listening to us. Make sure you like us. Make sure you leave us a review. Make sure you do all the things that us podcasters want you to do. And oh yeah, by the way, if you need us, you can go to Flipping Houses for Rookies or Creative REI Reply. And top right-hand side, there's a support ticket there. And if you're watching us live on one of the streams and have a question about the podcast, go ahead and fire it in wherever you can type, and I can answer that question. If it's not about the podcast, I prefer you use a support ticket so I can put more attention on you and not have to worry about my time restrictions with the podcast. I have the either good ability or unfortunate ability to sometimes talk too much. So it's hard for me to get everything in one podcast. Okay, enough of that. We got all of our housekeeping things out of the way, and we're ready to dig in. Okay?
Okay, here we go.
So, Pete, I'd like to start today's mind intervention with asking, what exactly is critical thinking? And here's my rendition of this transformational skill. Okay. Critical thinkers, first and foremost, respect evidence and reasoning. Respect clarity. Look at different points of view and will change their position when reasoning leads them there.
Oh, wait a minute. That last part. I don't know if that's really a thing, Bill. Does anybody do that?
I do.
That could be the key there. You might just stop the podcast there. Come on. Who can no, I think maybe I could do it differently. Hey, gee, maybe you're right. Oh, I didn't know that. Geez, who can do that? Ouch. Oh,
so a lot of this stuff I do naturally, but if you want to really get into this, you can go on to YouTube. I think his name is Tyler Andrew Cole is the author. You can listen to him. He's got some really good points on critical thinking. If you want to dive into critical thinking, this is not about, this is something like that, but if you want to go check him out, his name is Tyler Andrew Cole. But anyways.
By the way, critical thinking. I see a lot of critical thinking lately. Do we have to explain the good critical and the bad critical? Do you think people understand?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, people think of critical as like, criticizing somebody, putting them down. But you have a good definition for the proper way of how you're using it?
Yeah, so what you're saying is critical is expressing adverse or disapproving comments or judgment.
Sure.
Right? That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is something that you're very certain about, something that's very it's an objective analysis and evaluation of an issue or a situation.
Okay. Good. Just in case.
Yeah. So critical thinkers first and foremost respect evidence and reasoning. They respect clarity. They look at different points of view and will change positions when reason leads them there. What is reason?
Well, I think of reason as looking at something and deciding what's actually the best thing to do, all things considered.
Yeah.
It's not excuses. It's like, what would work best here? Like, oh, that's reasonable. Well, that makes sense. Oh, we should do that.
So I like, this is not part of my podcast, but there's something that just occurred to me, like really occurred to me. So reasoning is when you're using existing knowledge to draw your conclusions and make predictions.
Yeah.
Or construct explanations of what's going on.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Thinking is when you're scanning back into your history and looking at all the things you did wrong and didn't conclude. So thinking is using mental image pictures that you've stored and have attention on because you didn't succeed. So when somebody says, I have to think about it, they're not reasoning, they're not being objective. So reasoning is an objective thing. It's like outside of you. It's like being able to look at the facts, observe them, be aware of them, and be able to change your mind because something proved to you to work, which I'm going to talk about this in a little while. The evidence was good, right?
Yeah.
Where thinking is a subjective thing. and you're drawing off of past experiences that may not have gone so well.
Yeah, it sounds like much more emotional excuses
Yes.
for things instead of, I think you said it a few times wherever you got it. Like people decide things emotionally and try to back it up with logical reasoning after the fact. So,
And
so
the
those,
reason why I bring this up today, you'll see this in a few minutes, but this is what I run into with my coaching clients because they say, I think I should do this deal. Like, for example, I had a coaching client send me an email yesterday, said, I have this deal. And I think, let me see if I can remember the numbers. I think the house was worth 660. I think the seller was looking to get like 580, but was willing to do subject to. This happens to me all the time on subject to. As soon as they hear that the seller is willing to let them take over payments, everything else goes out the window. I think this is a subject to deal. If I had $1 for every time somebody told me they thought they had a subject to deal, that was not even close to a subject to deal, I would probably be able to buy a Rolls Royce.
Yep.
All right. So critical thinking is often misunderstood, especially when talking to real estate sellers about a potential deal, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest problem that we have in creative real estate is the seller thinks that they disrespect or don't know how to make their asset work for them properly. And they get confused about cash. They think cash is king. Right?
Well, yeah.
And cash, believe it or not, is a discounted price, or cash is a discounted opportunity for the seller if they just go for the cash.
Sure.
Right? And here's why. Most think that critical thinking is an innate skill. One you either have or don't have. Right? So I think some time ago, what was the name of the book? It's written by Dan Sullivan. It's like, what am I thinking about my thinking?
Yeah.
It's a vital book. Everybody that's listening to me right now should read that book. It's by Dan Sullivan. It's what am I thinking about my thinking? It's absolutely, positively life-changing if you read it, because when you're thinking something, you should stop for a second objectively and say, what am I thinking about right now?
Yeah. I mean, thinking just happens. If you don't, without even trying, you go thinking all the time. Things are twirling around your head. And it's like on automatic. If you don't stop and take control of it, it'll take you for a ride. Like you talk about are you being dragged down the river, or are you navigating the river? Are you being dragged, or are you driving the boat?
Exactly. So the reason why I talk about this on a creative real estate podcast is because too many of you are talking to a seller and thinking, what should I say next? Instead of observing and being aware of what's happening with your seller so that you can construct a solution. And I'm going to cover this in a few minutes. So let's just move on. So most think critical thinking is an innate skill, which is a myth, only because critical thinking is a skill that can be honed and developed over time, much like learning a new language, right? So my wife is learning Korean now.
Is she still on that?
Oh, it's brutal. She tries to talk to me in Korean. Oh, she's even got names for me, Yo-hoo or something like that. It's like I got a new name now, some new thing. But it's funny to listen to her, do the vowels and make the noises, because they're completely different than anything I heard of, right?
Different alphabet, different sounds in the words. Yeah.
So it's actually, I actually read an article the other day that said that learning another language helps people with Alzheimer's. It makes their mind do different things.
Wow.
All right. So today, my goal is to introduce you to transform your entire approach to creative real estate offers, and most likely to other parts of your life. Now, it's a little profound because it's subjective. What we're talking about is what's inside of your head. In other words, we're talking about the most important piece of real estate that you need to do, that you need to deal, the most important deal you have to do in real estate, and that's the real estate between your two ears, right?
Yes.
You'll need to start off by I'll have to start off by talking about your thought patterns and how you understand them. Now, this is all create real estate thought patterns, but it's for any part of your life.
Sure.
Right? Which is why I say, the book, What Am I Thinking About My Thinking from Dan Sullivan is amazing. And I know you have it, Peter, it's one of those books that should be read a couple times a year. Right? Because
it's helped amazing. Me. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read enough to get like a really good idea. And I've used it a number of times. Like, you're feeling a certain way. You're feeling good, you're feeling bad, usually bad about, you go, why am I feeling bad? What should I do? It helps you take a look at it and sort things out and go, oh, and pop out of it and move ahead. Right. It's really kind of simple, but if you don't do it, you can get stuck for half a day or a couple of days. And what's
I do know this much. It definitely can handle the subconscious mind that's speaking to you when you don't even know it's speaking to you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so here's the first thing. Your self-awareness is key here. And will help you to identify your emotional influences and thought patterns. Now, I'm going to say this, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, but what is it? AA, Alcoholic Anonymous? Is that what it is? AA?
Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah.
So they teach in their programs that the first step is say, I'm an alcoholic. Right? So that's an awareness that they have to be aware of before anything happens.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so your self-awareness is key here and will help you identify your emotional influences, right? And thought patterns.
Sure.
Just like an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting, right? I'm not saying we're doing that here, and I don't mean to pick on anybody or anything like that. It's just a good analogy of what a good job they do to get you through that, right?
Well, you can't make any progress if you're resisting the truth of something or what's really happening. You can't be denying a problem. You have to say, well, this is happening. Let's do something about it. You can't say no.
Yeah. So just think of this. This entire podcast I can put in one sentence right now.
Okay.
Well, maybe not one sentence, in a paragraph, the next 30 seconds. One of the things that I've noticed recently with my coaching clients is confronting. Being there in present time, being aware, observing. Because most of us aren't. When somebody else is talking, we're not thinking about what they're saying. We're not absorbing what they're saying. We're not perceiving what they're saying. We're not paying attention to their body language. We're not doing all of that stuff. We're doing something else. Like, for example, you're reading a book and you start thinking, I'm hungry. You're no longer reading that book. You're no longer confronting that book. You're no longer absorbed in that book. Right. And this happens way too much, which is why I like the book. I mean, I didn't even know I was going to do this morning, but I like the book. What Am I Thinking? About My Thinking from Dan Sullivan. It's a great book just for that reason, because you drift and don't realize you drift and you miss things. Right. And those things are critical. So that's what we're talking about. Your self-awareness right now. Right.
Yeah.
So most don't look for this. Right? They don't look for this awareness, this self-awareness at all, right? They assume that what they're doing is correct. Okay, it's kind of like somebody going into a seller call, thinking that they know enough without being script or without having any direction, and just arbitrarily just answering questions.
Wow.
Right, which is how a lot of rookies do it, right? So you're not looking for this self-awareness, but the heavy hitters, right? They look for this like it's an addictive drug. right? Methods for seeking constructive feedback. Being self-aware, you're looking for a constructive feedback. How is this person receiving my communication? Are they actually here with me in present time, or are they thinking about something else? Did they misunderstand it? You got a picture of a black cat in your mind. You need to make sure that they have that same picture of a black cat. Now, I could say, look at a black cat, and I could tell you, if we could bring callers on right now, the amount of ideas that we would get about a black cat would be, it would blow you away. I just noticed. All right, Chris. Chris says that he's been getting here late, but he said that he absolutely wanted to say he loves the new intro and exit. Thank you very much. I worked on that quite a bit. And with the new private podcast, we're going to have intros and exits different for each series, because there's going to be more than one series. I'm kind of hoping that when I go into the private podcasting, instead of being just a general subject, we can break things down, like talk about, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but talk about just subject to deals, or just slot deals, or just, and drill hard into them. You know what I mean? That's what I'm kind of hoping for, but we'll see what happens.
Well, that sounds good.
So good feedback is a vital part to help you to improve your patterns.
Yeah.
Right. You need to have, and it's not that critical that we were talking about before, where somebody has disdain. Like, do you know you're making this noise when you talk? You know, they're like, so how do you know when something is actual, when somebody's being critical of you and actually like disapproving of you? How do you know that? And that's the answer right there, is they disapprove of you, and they're trying, and they're making fun of you. Which, by the way, the only reason why somebody's critical is because they themselves have done that before. And now they're being critical of you because of it, right?
Yeah.
So this was the entire presidential race in 2024, right? Is each were blaming others on what they themselves were doing. Right. So
that's a
good feedback is a good thing, right? And it will improve your patterns. So emotional and cognitive biases can and do distort thinking decisions. That's pretty deep.
Say it again. Emotional and cognitive
biases. What is a bias?
Well, that's when you have opinions that are kind of tilted your way for some reason. You're not being objective about it. You're rooting for your team, or you like certain things, and it's not really fair or logical. You're just bending one way, a little bit irrationally.
Right. So what happens is everybody wants to be right. Your analytical mind cannot be wrong. When you're logically thinking, you assume you are correct.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I like how you said that. You assume it. You hope you are, but you got to find out.
So when you have a bias, your inclination or preference for something is tainted, right?
Yeah.
So probably the best way or best example I can give you of this is a rookie telling me he would never do a subject to deal himself. That's a cognitive bias. It's an emotional shaping thought.
Okay.
Because this generates an assumption that will tend to be way off base. And the reason why I say this is because a subject to deal means that you take over a seller's mortgage and the deed goes in your name. And you're like, I would never do that.
Hmm.
And I've had coaching clients leave my coaching group because I can't break them of this.
What?
Yeah, I have a student in Creative REI Replay because we do a 90-minute, usually 90 minutes, sometimes it's 60, but 90-minute support call every Thursday night, 7 o'clock Thursday nights, for creative real estate, and I help them with their deals and any kind of support tickets. Sean helps them with their support with it, and every Thursday night we do this. And I have a student in there that just can't wrap their mind around why someone would pay extra on a lease option they can't get a bank loan. And I work with him, and I just can't get him past that. That's a cognitive bias,
Sorry.
emotional shaping thought.
Well, it's one thing if it's theoretical and we're going to see if it works, and they go, I don't think it's going to work. But it's been done for like hundreds of years, and so it's been done. We're not trying to prove something. We're just saying that something exists, and they still can't accept something that actually happens. I'm sorry.
So
I feel bad.
So I will tell you this: that I'm crazy about my wife. I love my wife to death. I have no idea why.
I'll tell you sometime if you want.
The thing is that I don't do anything anymore because her thinking is very erratic. Like she'll love beef this week, and next week can't eat any. She's got to eat just fish.
Huh.
I mean, she's very, very erratic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always ask her, what do you want to do? What do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Do you think we should do this? It's a constant surveying of her ideas, and then I match them to my own.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is what you got to do with your seller. You can't have a cognitive bias.
Yeah.
Right? At least in the discovery stage. Now, when it comes time for you to do deals, that's a different story. We're going to talk about that in a minute, right? So now the best way anyone could handle this cognitive bias or the assumptions that they have is to record themselves in seller conversations. And all these things I'm going to talk about, this is the best thing that you can do is record yourselves. Then you could put these recordings in a ChatGPT.
Wow.
And have the ChatGPT transcribe them and give you feedback.
That's crazy. I never thought. That's interesting.
But don't worry, because I am working on, and I would think that in another week or so, I'm going to have the first version of this. I have a tool that I have created with AI that I've influenced on my coaching strategies. So what we're going to do is that we're going to have a tool that you're going to have access to that you could actually record yourself, take the MP3 file, which, by the way, you could do that with Audacity, which is a free recording device, and just look up audacity.org and download it to any computer. What I do is I take my cell phone and put it on speaker, and I just sit by my computer, and I have the entire conversation record on Audacity.
Yep.
Audacity makes it an MP3 file. You'll be able to upload that file into this software that I've made, and I can critique your sales call based on the script that I have, based on the offer calculator, based on all the things that I teach. It will critique your call. And not only that, but at the end, it will tell you what you need to do, like the sequence you need to do after the fact. This is for you, Peter. I did this for you because you're asking me these questions. You're asking these questions like, I got to this certain point, what do I do?
Yeah. So
I show you the sequences. I even went as far as have the tool like print messages. Like the next time, like if you got to leave voice messages, it gives you 2 or 3 voice messages. It gives you 2 or 3 text messages you can send, and it even gives you a mini script on the next phone call when you call them back.
That's crazy.
In this tool that I made it by myself. All right, so that will come soon. But my point is, and I'm not here to pitch that right now. I'm just here to tell you this is how you're going to break your cognitive biases. You are your best coach.
Mm-hmm.
You need to hear yourself talk, right? All right. So the next point I need to make is critical thinking involves curiosity and activity seeking new information that challenges and expands your understanding. Now, when I took my sabbatical for 8 months, there was a specific tape that I would listen to. It was actually about 8 minutes. I'm sorry, 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes, which is not something that I can share with you because it was a private thing. But the point is this. What I learned about myself, I had no freaking clue.
Hmm.
And the reason why I am who I am is because I'm extremely curious. I'm a nosy son of a bitch. And it's not nosy in a bad way. I want to know what's going on. And I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes, okay? So, but there's a reason you have to be curious. You have to wonder why. Everything in this world is cause and effect. So if your seller's got an effect, the more you understand about that cause, the more you're going to be able to help them. Okay, and I'm going to come back to that now. But you have to be very careful with this one about being curious and understanding. See, you don't want to collect information that aligns with your emotional bias or your emotional thought and gain agreement just to make you right. Right? You have to collect information, which, by the way, this world currently, as we sit here right now, is on information overload, but is starving for wisdom.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're looking for the wisdom in the deal. You're looking for the way somebody would think, right? Can you give us a good definition of wisdom before we go?
No.
You can't?
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, wisdom is not just facts. It's not education. I would say it's being able to look at something and have a viewpoint of how to understand it.
Right. That's what I thought. No,
Yeah.
what wisdom is the use of knowledge and experience to make good judgment.
Say it again.
Wisdom is one's knowledge and experience to make good judgment.
Okay.
See, information doesn't allow you to make good judgment because information could be incorrect. So the word here is experience, the use of one's knowledge and experience, right? So information overload is the use of information and one's experience to make a good judgment. So information's good, but if you don't apply it or duplicate it correctly and apply it correctly and know that it's correct, right? You got to know that it's correct. So you knock out any other reasons, right?
Yep.
Which is what I do when I'm coaching, because I know there's certain things that are correct, especially on the scripts and stuff. Somebody will say that, I have a coaching client will say to me, I keep hearing this, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's because there's something they're not doing from the script. They're altering the script somehow and actually getting those results. And when I dig into it, I always find the sentence that they've altered because they had a biased disagreement with it.
Wow.
Right.
Sure. Of course, they don't realize it.
Right.
They think they're doing the right thing somehow.
Right.
But then, of course, it doesn't work out. So
here is what I consider the most valuable part of this podcast. Me personally, having coached lots of people and done hundreds and hundreds of deals. Instead of doing all the things we're talking about, you should operate off of evidence-based thinking for more reliable conclusions. Evidence-based thinking, right? I talk about this very often, right? And I sporadically just they pop out of my mouth. Well, I'm going to put them in context right now, right?
Okay.
So, two things. I taught this to my children at a very young age. I have 2 daughters. I was worried about them with boys.
Sure.
So I taught them this at a very young age. You need to pay attention to what people do, not what they say. Right? this is how I made my decision on who I was going to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
I paid attention to not the rhetoric, but what somebody did, what somebody was doing, and I had evidence of it, personal evidence of it, so that I could make a judgment. That's wisdom. I had information and experience, and I developed wisdom. Right. Number two, if it's not in writing, it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So the person says, "Oh, I'm behind 8 payments." Okay, do you have a mortgage statement so I can see that? Do you have a letter from the bank? What can I see?
Right.
Send me the letter. Well, I did a modification. Okay, good. Send me the modification agreement. Oh, well, I don't have an agreement. Well, then you didn't do a modification.
Yeah, right.
You see what I'm saying? So
Sure.
You're being curious. You're wondering what they're saying, and you're not saying, because I always say all sellers are liars, which is kind of harsh. But I say that because not that they mean to lie to you, not that they're trying. Well, first of all, any seller is going to want to tell you what you want to hear so that you'll give them what they want. That's just a natural human thing, right? But by doing some of these things that I'm talking about, right, and operating off of evidence-based thinking, right? It's kind of like you go in, you have a job, right? And you go in for a review, which usually means a raise, right? What is your boss gonna base the information off of? Your human resource record, right? Like, what have you done or what have you not done? He's got evidence-based thinking on whether your review is good or bad. This is no different than when you're talking to a seller, right?
Sure.
So last week we talked about a word called extrapolation, or podcast number 431, extrapolation. Extrapolation means you have evidence, you have data, you have reasoning already in place, and that data from the past is going to launch you into the future, because the way somebody does something is the way they do everything. So if your seller hasn't paid their mortgage for 6 months, that means their car payment is not good. That means their taxes are bad. That means they probably have liens on the house. That means the house has not had maintenance in a year or two.
Yeah. You can tell all these things just driving by a house, right? You look at a house and you go, wow, look at that guy. He's out of control. You look in somebody's car. Wow, what a mess. And you can look at everything else as a mess. Right. Sad, but it's true.
That's right. So logical reasoning is the backbone of critical thinking, right? And that comes from being aware and being curious and being in present time. Remember in podcast number 430, I talked about there's 3 types of time, right? There's past, present, future, which, by the way, I got that from Michael Gerber 20 years ago in the E-Myth. E-Myth means entrepreneurial myth, because he says there's 3 types of time. There's the past, present, and future. Past is employees, present is the manager, and future is the owner. Right? So just think with that. So one of the reasons why you get misinformation is because they leave time out. Right? So they're telling you about this thing, and like, oh well, we put a brand new furnace in. And unless you're curious, like, well, oh, when did you do that? That brand new furnace went in 10 years ago because they left the time out.
Yeah, but Bill, it was brand new when they put it in.
Right. You understand? So I'm being very, very profound here, but this is, I mean, when you start to do this and start to use it, you're going to find that things just fall in your lap, and you'll make deals because people start telling you their personal way.
Right. And what you're leading us to is asking the right questions because you're curious. Being curious, wanting to know.
So you have to be able to be curious, you have to be in present time, and you have to observe correctly, right? And the way you observe correctly is by looking for the evidence or getting the evidence, right? So in other words, if you say to me, Peter, I'm going to get I'm a bank, and you're trying to get a loan from me, and you say, well, I make $100,000 a year. I'm going to pre-qualify you on the $100,000 a year, but as sooner or later, you're going to have to give me compliance or evidence on you making $100,000 a year. This is no different than with your seller. When you're talking to your seller, you're pre-qualifying them, and then they have to give you the evidence or the compliance of what they said, right? Before you can make a decision.
Yeah.
Anyways, enough of that. This brings me to the next one, which is overcoming cognitive biases, right? These tend to be the anchors that hold you down in the creative part of creative real estate, right? So you have to overcome your cognitive biases. By the way, we can call this subconscious mind, right? You have to have mental flexibility to help you adapt new information and perspectives. You have to be flexible. See, here's the thing. Your thought, let me see if I get this straight. Your thoughts, that's what it should be. Your thoughts have no repercussion until they are communicated and put into the physical universe. Right? This is very important. Now, I'm not telling you to be covert and not communicate, but some information, you wouldn't talk to well, maybe nowadays they would, but you wouldn't talk to your 5-year-old kid, your 5-year-old daughter about sex. You might have sex 5 times a week and it's the best part of your life and you're happy because of it, right? But you're not going to tell your 5-year-old or 10-year-old kid that, right?
Nor your 18-year-old, tell you.
Right. So there's a responsibility factor on this, right? Yeah. So you have to have responsibility on what you say and what you don't say, right? So the point is that the only time you have a repercussion of what you're thinking is when you let it fly through your lips and it goes into the physical universe.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to have some sort of a self-reflection before letting the words fly. Right? This is important because, I was going to give you an example, but I wrote one down here. Here's a good example of this. Someone's learning the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And they start trading without using money. That's a common thing in the stock market, right? To learn the stock market, you start picking stocks and you start tracking them to see if you would have or not made money. It's a common thing, right?
Sure, you can do that. You can do a test before you blow some money, yeah.
Right, so it's a mock trade to see if they end up before actually putting money into the deal, right? Which is kind of like what we do with options, right?
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing. So my point is that you don't have to communicate, oh, I'm nervous about this deal to your seller. You can say, well, let's just put it on the market. You just keep your responsibility in the deal clean, right? So if you're nervous or you're afraid to do a deal, just don't commit to the deal fully. And that's the reason why you want to do options. It's because you want to test the transaction. No different than testing the stock market without putting your money in.
Yep.
So we're going to test real estate without putting our money in because we're going to give somebody $10 or $100 for an option consideration deposit, and we're going to go test the market to see what the buyer is willing to give us for money, right? So you don't need to communicate to your seller you're afraid or you're nervous. You're going to say to them, well, let's give it a try and see what happens. Right? Now, am I making sense so far? Am I doing okay? Or am I too profound?
I think so. Well, I've heard the rest of the podcasts and I've been with you a while. If this is the first podcast I'm going to listen to, it could be interesting, but we'll hopefully have some background in real estate and heard other podcasts for the, some more details of how options work. But that's basic real estate stuff you should know.
Good. I was just going to ask Chris to give us feedback, but he said yes, so I'm good.
Chris is good. Yeah, he's been here a couple
of times. Yeah, he's been around. All right, now this drops us into the lap of effective problem-solving techniques. Because up until this point, we've been trying to look for the problem. We've been kind of digging in. We've been, piercing the social veneer, piercing the the acute personality, like going to a party, right, and acting like everything's good. In the meantime, you and your husband are on the verge of divorce, right?
Yeah.
All right. So now let's look at this deeper, only because we are all taught if we solve the seller's problems, we get a deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about that a lot, but how do you actually do that? Right? So effective problem solving combines a good analysis with some creativity or outside of the box thinking.
Yeah.
And even outrageous solutions work best, right? And they wipe any slate clean. Right? Now pay attention to what I just said, because I did it took me what I just said to you has taken me a year to figure out how to say in one sentence. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go into a deal with preconceived ideas, you're going to get preconceived solutions. Right? I think just because the numbers say it's a subject to deal, you go in and start talking about subject to. Right?
Yeah. Well, the math is one thing, and the person that owns the house, that's a whole other animal.
Hang on one second. I just need to let the girls know that you and I are on the podcast.
Oh, yes. The girls.
Yeah, the VAs.
It's early. Okay.
Oh man, I butchered my spelling there. All right. So is this making sense so far?
Sure.
Okay. So this is the reason why we do discovery on our deal first. Okay. And why we don't give offers until we have a why.
Yeah.
A why, the reason why. When you find out why somebody is selling a house, the actual real reason, the deal completely changes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's why we do discovery. Now, here's the thing for me. I've never said this before because I didn't know it was happening. Right?
Really?
So here's the thing for me. The exact point that I stop the discovery stage, you helped me with this because you keep pounding me lately like, Bill, I've never gotten this far. I don't know what to do, which to me is just like, to be honest with you, I think about it, well, he's just being a baby. He could figure this out. And that's I had to change my viewpoint on it, right? Because it's like, you know this, Peter, you're just not thinking, right? But I realized what I do at this point that you're not doing. And I need to figure it out for myself so I can help you, right? So here's the exact point that this discovery stops. And I go into solution mode or start offering offers or start offer generating, right? See, once I feel like the problem has become mine, right? Temporarily. I'm not saying that it's my problem, but I feel temporarily like, oh yeah, I feel like this problem's mine because they're looking at me. You're looking at me and the seller's looking at me for a solution. This is kind of like a doctor. Like my wife had cancer, which she's cancer free now. But when we were in the doctor's office, I noticed this in the doctor's office. It's like at the time we didn't have insurance. And the doctor, she felt like there was at one point she just felt bad for us, and she started helping us with prescriptions and writing things and helping us and telling us to go to these clinics and doing all these things because we didn't have insurance. She knew we were sincere.
Yeah.
right? So once I feel like the problem has become mine temporarily, and I can actually feel the emotions and understand my seller's position because I'm now on their side of the table looking at their point of view, I've got it. This is actually a copywriting thing because when you're doing copywriting, you have to experience purchasing the product that you're going to try to sell on the copywriting. Copywriting is salesmanship on a page, right? So
Sure.
it's the same exact thing. The reason why I can copyright real estate so easily is because I've been through so much, right?
Right.
So when I actually feel like it's my problem and I have to solve this as if it was my house or my situation, and I have to do it for me and then give them advice, I come off very sincere because I now carry or bear this heavy weighing problem too. Right? It is really my help button being pushed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You remember the button for Staples? What was that red button? Easy,
Oh, yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Need pencils. Push
Yeah.
button. Boop.
Here's the thing, and our next point: you need to analyze information and arguments, right? Or find the anatomy of your seller's argument, claims, premises for thinking. This is all in the name of, because now if I'm going to actually feel and become the person as if I own the house and I had these problems, that's going to push me into, well, is the seller's arguments correct? Are their claims correct? Right? Are there premises of thinking this way? Would I come up with the same conclusion as they did? Because now I'm being them, or I'm in that situation. So I think to myself, would I come up with that conclusion? Would I do what they're doing?
Right.
Right.
Well, once you find an actual problem, then the next logical thing is look for solutions. But there's a lot of different solutions people come up with. You often talk about, yeah, I do solution number one, and not so good. Maybe what if I did, and not so good. So there could be many solutions until you get one that, oh, let's go with that. So the seller is only on the phone with us because they haven't found their correct solution. So we have to find something else until they go pop and make sense to them and something we could do.
Right. So you're talking about doing the solutions. You're ahead of where I am right now. Where I am is I if this was my problem, what would I do?
And wouldn't that be solutions or what?
I can't get there yet because I don't know that I have the right why.
No, yeah, but I'm saying
But once I do, yes.
Once you find that, they have been trying this, that, and the other.
Now here's how you can weed through this shaft or get through this confusion. There's three things you can do. Okay. The first thing you need to do is you need to evaluate the quality and relevance of the evidence they're presenting you. Is it real with proof or not? Number two, be aware of the difference between contrary facts, right? So a contrary fact means there's two facts that act like they are correct and they're causing confusion, right? Like the seller's telling me they're 3 months behind on payments, but they just told me they're making payments on the house. What do you mean you're making payments? Yeah, I just made a payment yesterday. That's contrary facts. They're two facts that act like they're correct and they're pivotal points in your conversation, but they don't add up.
Yeah. Well,
then you find out, well, yeah, I was 3 months behind and I decided to pay month 4 just so that I don't go in foreclosure. Right. And then so that's when you go back into question number one, right? Evaluate and qualify evaluate the quality and relevance of the evidence. Right. So now number two is be aware of the difference between contrary facts, right? and caution, right? So you have to be like, what's their caution? Why are they stepping lightly?
What are they worried about?
Yeah, right. Which brings us to number 3. By doing good discovery and being curious, you will unravel common logical fallacies, right? They're mistakes that the seller make and believe they were correct for them.
Mm-hmm.
That will bring to the center stage the seller's flawed reasoning or false data that they are operating with and truly believe it and don't know the difference. This goes back to what you were just saying before. One of the tests that I did with you a long time ago, and you still talk about it to this day, is okay. So you have a problem, right? Like I don't have enough money to buy lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is well, maybe I can borrow money, right? So what I've always done is I'll push myself to come up with 10 solutions.
Yep.
At least 5 anyways, before I make a decision. And you'll realize by the 10th solution, you know what? Son of a gun, I got leftovers from last night. I can just go eat those.
Right.
Right. So pushing, and that's what I'm talking about here is by doing the discovery and being curious, you will unravel common logical fallacies. In other words, the seller thinks they're logical, but they aren't. And you're like, why would they think that? Why would they want to get $250,000 when Zillow says it's worth $150,000?
Yep.
Right. Which, by the way, I've asked that question point blank. I'll say to them, so you're asking $250,000. Zillow says it's $150,000. Could you tell me the reason why? Oh yeah, I got 3 acres that it's adjacent to this that somebody could actually split up and put a building lot on it. Oh, right. Or just the opposite. They have because my house is the nicest house in the neighborhood.
My favorite is, well, that's how much I need. Well, that's nice. Good luck with that.
Exactly. Right. So this is where that kind of comes in. So you need to maintain objectively, right, lack of bias or use your own opinions and personal feelings when evaluating arguments, even if you disagree. So you can't get your back up and present the remember what I told you about thinking before. When you're thinking, it's only bad when it comes out of your lips. I think you're nuts for asking $250,000. It's only on Zillow for $150,000. What are you, a jerk?
Right? Hey, that's a critical way of being critical.
Exactly.
Jeez.
And by the way, I see this happen most often when talking price, like we just talked about, or what a house is worth, right? Because really, leads will argue with you on how much the seller wants. So we're kind of running out of time here, and I could probably go on for another 20 minutes or half an hour, but the thing that I do is this is where the saying comes in. And I'm hoping the last couple of podcasts, I'm trying to tie everything together because I know we're going to be not doing these podcasts in some time. So I'm trying to summarize 432 podcasts, right? So I've always said in the past, I'll pay whatever price you want as long as you give me terms.
Yep.
So that $250,000 house that's $100,000 over market value, $150,000, I will do that deal. If you give me 30 years worth of term. And I can let appreciation, depreciation, and all the magical tools that we have in the back end that we never talk about fix the over $100,000 price. Right. So when they say, "Oh, well, I can't give you 30 years. I want my cash right now." Oh, well, if you want your cash right now, here's how it works.
Yep.
Instead of evaluating for them and then invalidating them. Right. So evaluating means you're making decisions for them or thinking for them, and invalidating is making them wrong for their decisions. Right. Instead of doing that, you kind of come into it backwards. Oh, well, okay, I can give you $250,000 for the house. The only way I could do that is make payments for 360 months.
Yeah, it's like you're just presenting the factual data, the evidence-based information. This is how it works. It's not even us. The next guy would have to do that. Anybody would have to do this, how the market works. And you present the 2 facts, and they have to pick one. Now, it might take them a while to come around, huh?
Right.
But at least have the truth.
Right. Which means we'll now have to talk about how we will need to engage with diverse or very different ideas than ours, perspectives, right? So we need to talk about that. So we're talking about it now, but this goes back to podcast number 430, okay, where I talked about phrases like, let's pretend we could. Remember, I gave you those phrases?
Yeah.
What
if we did this? Like, hey, did you ever thought of doing it this way?
Right.
I knew a guy who did this one. Did you ever hear of that?
Right.
So you're not shoving it in their face.
Imagine this for a moment. Or assume we're able to do blah. Right? Like, assume I was able to pay the $250,000. Would you consider letting me pay for 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you ever heard of or seen this? Right?
Yeah.
So have you ever heard of somebody giving you an offer or seen somebody giving you an offer that's $100,000 over market value? Or has it been on the market for 500 days for a reason? Right? Another one is entertain me for a moment. That's a good one. Entertain me for a moment. In other words, you're putting them in your shoes, right? Because you're right. The buyer says, because that's how much I need. Well, they're not taking consideration. I'm sorry, the seller says that's how much I need. Yeah. They're not taking in consideration that the buyer has to go get the money and somebody has to appraise it, and somebody's not just going to give them $100,000 over market value.
Yeah, because
you have to break their what they think is a logical process, right?
Yeah, it looks like to me they're just doing their world in their little head and not appreciating the world around them and the reality of what will happen.
Right.
Considering buyers and banks and lawyers and stuff. But what's going to happen? Think about it.
So now I'm talking about being flexible, right? So now here's the trick. So in other words, you're not creating upset in the conversation. You're keeping the conversation flowing with affinity, right? You're still, even though their reality is off, you're communicating and you have affinity. You're still there. You still like the conversation, and their reality is way off. Doesn't mean that you should get pissed off and cut your communication, right? Mm-hmm. So now here's the trick: be willing to change your point of view or change your mind when presented with compelling evidence. So when I hear somebody say, well, I'm asking $250,000 for a $150,000 house, I automatically assume, well, the seller doesn't really know how to handle this transaction. Mm-hmm. So I need to get compelling evidence on why they're asking the $250,000, because I'd be willing to change my mind that it's worth $250,000 if they can give me compliant evidence on why it's worth $250,000. Like, for example, which has happened to me many times. Oh yeah, well, I have a complete building lot attached to it. It's all under one deed. I haven't split the lots up yet. Mm-hmm. Right? That's compelling evidence, and they think that the lot is worth $100,000. Oh, well, in that case, I have to be willing to change my mind and go do my due diligence and find out. Oh, yeah, there is a piece of property. Well, maybe it's not worth $100,000, but it's worth $80,000. Right? Sure. Instead of just ridging up or like stiffening up. You know what I mean? You have to be willing to be flexible and actually allow the seller to have their day in court and prove to you that it's worth it.
Sure.
Right? So realize regular exposure to diverse or different ideas broadens your thinking. Asking these things and putting yourself and doing all the things we're talking about today, putting yourself in the other person's shoes and working, is why I spend so much time lately talking about our buyers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They find that I've completely changed after 400 podcasts. I've changed I flipped it on its head, right? Because I had this realization after doing all these deals, yep, right, that the buyer funds the deal, right? Mm-hmm. Your profits, and they'll set you financially free. The reason why real estate investors are poor, they're one of the brokest people on planet Earth, right? because they don't have property to present to a buyer and attract the buyer. This is like saying, I want to raise bees, but I don't have any honey, right? There's no reason for the bees to come there and stay there. There's no honey. Or I'm probably saying that wrong, but nectar from a flower or something like that.
Oh,
it's like,
yeah. There's no flowers.
Yeah, there's no flowers, right? Or you could say, I want to be a restaurant owner, but I don't have any food. So how are you gonna get clients to come and eat? Walmart would not be Walmart if they weren't so diverse with our product. I mean, I know. For example, today I was looking for a leaf blower, right? Because my leaf blower stopped running, brand new leaf blower, and it stopped running. And I've just decided. I think I don't know what I paid for the leaf blower, $100 and something, and I'm like, it'll cost me that much to get somebody to fix it. Screw that thing. I don't want to go fix it and spend all that time on it. I don't have the time these days. I'm just going to go to Home Depot and I'm going to just buy another leaf blower. And then I'll figure out the leaf blower some other day and get somebody to fix it, whatever, and then I'll sell it on Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just knowing your audience. Right? So the point is that your profits, the deal consummates. All of your thoughts, all of your whatever I want to do in real estate lies in your buyer. If you don't have a buyer, right? Like if I were to go to Amazon and there were no leaf blowers, I wouldn't go to Amazon. If I went to Home Depot and they didn't have any leaf blowers, how long am I going to stay there?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The shelf's empty.
Yep.
Right? And if you don't have buyers, then you don't have financial independence or freedom. Because buyers are paying you. So what you need to do is you need to get consignment deals, which nobody ever talks about, right? This is exactly what realtors do. They get properties on consignment. They call it a listing contract. What is consignment? Consignment means they have a property, they don't know how to sell it, they don't want to be bothered, they don't want to deal with it, and they're allowing you to come along and do it for them for a fee or a profit. Mm-hmm. So 5% is the national think on how much you should get paid to do the transaction. So if you can come along and get somebody to give you a 5% discount and sign an option agreement with them and then just put that on the market and learn and study your buyers, your buyer is who you need to know. Your buyer is who you got to have. Why is the buyer buying a house? Why do they like this area? Why do they like that school? Why do they like that grocery store? Why do they like that street? Why do they like that type of house? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they willing to go through with the mortgage agent to get all of this stuff? And when you nail that, now it becomes very easy to talk to your sellers. It's like survey technology. Ask your buyer what they want and then produce it. It's what good realtors do.
Mm-hmm.
They know the houses they can get, right? Why do you think a realtor wants you to do all the repairs in the house?
Because that's what the buyer wants.
And they want a quick sale. But they know if they have the house a specific way, the buyer will walk in and they'll close in 3 days. They'll get a deal in 3 days. Right?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I have more of this kind of stuff, and I was thinking that maybe podcast number 433, I might do more, but I'm not sure about that. I think what I might do is in the last stint, I think I might go back to ground zero and start talking about deal structuring again and start going through some of the deal structuring, because our deal structuring has changed in 432 podcasts. So I was thinking that maybe we'll do that. So I'm not sure yet. I got to get some feedback on what's going on here. Hopefully I didn't go too profound on you guys today. Hopefully you got something out of this. You can at least realize that you can change your critical thinking. Probably the most important thing here is be aware, be out, observe what you're really looking at. Make sure you get evidence from your information. Take your information and turn it into wisdom, right? And actually be curious. poke around, ask questions. Don't be afraid to break that social veneer, because if you really are going to help someone, you need to get behind that temporary attitude, right? Yeah, Chris says maybe underwriting too, right? So in other words, not just getting a deal, but underwriting the deals. Absolutely, all this information. See, here's the thing. Too many rookies think they need to have a 45-minute to an hour conversation, get all the data, have the seller say yes, and they got a deal, and they're going to get paid from it for the next 10 years. And that's just not how it goes anymore. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we work on deals. Well, let's put it this way. I've been looking at direct mail lately, which I haven't done because I've been too busy. But I've been looking at direct mail because, like I talked about in podcast number 431, you need to have 7 to 12 different ways to touch a seller before they sometimes actually pay attention to you, before they even take you as real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You may have to do that. Right? You have to present yourself as a real human being that is in their shoes, helping them with their problem. If they actually know that you've duplicated or understood or completely are tracking with them on their problem, and that you truly do want to help, help is a hard thing to sell, because today's world, and believe me, you and I know that, Peter, because we're an hour outside of New York, an hour from Times Square in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
The thing in New York City is keep to yourself. Don't talk to anybody, because I might get hurt. Right? And so help is a hard thing, because it's been betrayed so much in so many of us that when you come along and say, I want to help, people don't believe you, especially if you're not charging for it. Right? So anyways, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. Make sure you subscribe to us wherever you're watching us or listening to us. Make sure you like us. Make sure you leave a review. And if you have any questions that you need help with, go to flippinghousesforrookies.com or creativereply.com, which, by the way, you should go check out that software. There is a link in the chat. I'm sorry, there is a link in the description if you want to go check it out. If you get a point where you can actually stop doing whatever you're doing while you're listening to this podcast, you can click on that link and it'll take you over there. And we do amazing things for you. Sell your leads for as low as 66 cents and then let you use our software for free so you can close the deal. I think that's pretty awesome. Okay. Over now. We'll talk to you at podcast number 431. Have a good week. Flourish and prosper. Bye-bye.